Welcome to the podcast. It's 2023. Are you excited? I am. I am. I am. I am excited to help a lot of women build their confidence in 2023. It was 2022 in May, that I took the business full time. And since then, I've done a lot of what feels like really important work to me. I dream of a world where more women are more confident because I think the world needs it. So if you need it, this is the place for you. Welcome to the podcast. First thing, I should invite you to the class that we are holding on the 26th of January. I'll drop a link in the show notes. Go and get in there. It's Grow Your Confidence in 2023, and we'll be helping you uncover all of the reasons why your confidence might not be exactly where you want it at the moment, and then helping you to create a personal plan so that you can get your confidence where it needs to be. And you will have what you need by the end of that class to understand why your confidence isn't where you want and how you need to work, what you need to do in order to get it where you want it to be. So come and join us. I've already run the class a couple of times now, and it's been great. So come and get into that class. And today, we're going to be talking about big, important people. Big cheeses. The bosses, your boss, the board, the director of that business you're working for, right? You get it. Big, important people. It might be that big, important client. And I want you to think as we start this episode about who are the big, important people in your world? And how do you feel around them? So I'm not talking about the run-of-the-mill people that you engage with maybe all the time, like your team, your colleagues, people you just kind of feel cool with. I'm talking about those people that you think of as like the big, important people. Who are they for you? How do you feel around them? Do you engage with those big, important people in the same way that you engage with your colleagues and your peers? Are you able to express yourself as easily with those big, important people as you are with your team, for instance? Would you spend the same amount of time checking an email that goes to the big, important person as you would checking an email that goes to somebody else? Maybe not. If the answer to any of those questions is no, I do not feel as happy, engaged, comfortable, confident with the big, important people as I do with the quote unquote normal people, then this episode's for you. And the reason that I'm describing them as big, important people, it might seem like a weird way of describing them, but I think you know what I mean. But it's because that is how my client Melissa described them. And when she came to me, she said she mostly felt comfortable in her role and she mostly felt fairly confident until enter stage left a big, important person. And then things started shifting for her. Then her confidence faltered. She found like she stumbled on her words. She didn't as easily share her ideas or opinions. She wouldn't challenge them, even though she would challenge other people, even when she didn't agree with them or she thought they were wrong. And Melissa's given me her permission, her express permission to talk to you today about her experiences on the podcast on the basis that it might help you deal with your version of the big, important people. And the first thing to notice is that my client Melissa told me about these big, important people in our first meeting and our struggles with them. And I said, what do you think is going on here? Why do you think you're struggling with them? And she said, well, I think it's because of who they are. So in this instance, they were executive directors in the business that she worked for. So they were senior. They were as senior as you could get in her business. And she said, I think I struggle because of who they are, because they're the executive directors. And when we looked at it a little bit closer, it turns out that it wasn't who they were per se, but it was her thoughts about them. And we uncovered this because actually Melissa's direct boss was one of these executive directors. And with her direct boss, she felt really comfortable. She felt confident. She didn't feel any of that nervousness or that worry or that reticence or that hesitation with her boss, who was an executive director, as she did with the others. So it was like, okay, it's not the fact that they're an executive director per se, because you feel perfectly confident with your boss. There has to be something else going on. And because I'm a coach, and because she's coming to me for help with this, I know that one of the first things I have to do is to help her to figure out, what is she thinking about these people? And when she's thinking that, what is she feeling? And then when she's feeling that, what is she doing? And then when she does those things, what result does she get? Because she's telling me that it's a result that she doesn't want right now. She can't do her work effectively when she's working with them. She can't be as articulate as she wants to be. She can't give her opinions and suggestions, even though she needs to, because actually her role demands it. She spends too long checking an email, like she's getting all these results that she doesn't want. So we have to really get under the skin of why. Why is this happening? And we realized that the why was because she's got some thoughts about these big important people. And I guess maybe you've already figured this out, because she calls them big important people, which is a clue in and of itself, right? And when we started looking into what are her thoughts about these big important people, and this wasn't stuff she was consciously thinking, but it was stuff that was hanging around in the background, and it was having an impact on her. And it was thoughts like, they know everything. I have to get this perfect. They're going to judge me. When she was interacting with them, or she was going to interact with them, even if she wasn't consciously aware of it, those thoughts were in her mind. And those thoughts, to her brain and her body, spelled danger. Those thoughts like queued up that stress response where your adrenaline and your cortisol is released. And that is fight, flight, freeze, fawn. Have you ever noticed this when you're interacting with your big important people? Have you ever noticed that you go a bit more blank than you would normally? Have you noticed that you're a bit more quiet? You may not have noticed, but you may be more still, or you may be more fidgety. You may be in your head more. You may second guess yourself more. That is, all of that was what Melissa was doing around these big important people. And I want to take a second with you to just think about this when she's thinking these thoughts, I have to get this perfect. They're going to judge me. They know everything. I don't. When she's thinking all that, it's spelling danger, and it's queuing up that fight or flight response. But I just want to take you through fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, and just explore a little bit about, what do they look like in a work context? So the first one, fight. Now, she didn't think she was doing this. Fight seemed to have been completely skipped over. That wasn't Melissa's response. But you might see people being, when this response is triggered, you might see people being aggressive, combative. You know what I mean. I never know how you say that. Taking points unduly, kind of riling people. That might be due to a fight response. Flight is the next one. And if this one had its way, you might just get up and walk out of the meeting that you're in, or just click and leave the Teams meeting or the Zoom meeting or whatever that you're in. your desire is to flight, is to flee. And you're getting that adrenaline and that cortisol so that you can actually do that, so you can actually run away and run away fast. Now, some people might do that in a meeting. They might just exit. They might also flight in terms of their attention. So imagine you're still sat in the meeting, but you're not really there. You've kind of retreated into yourself. You think, what's the point? I'm not going to say anything. Or they don't want to hear from me. Anything that like disconnects you and sends you inside, that can be like a flight response. It doesn't look like flight because you're still sat there, but you're there more in body than in spirit. And then a freeze response. Well, what might that look like? I'm sure you've had a moment where your brain has gone blank. I know I've had plenty. And this it can happen in an interview, right? Or something where they ask you a question, just staring at them like, there is literally nothing happening in my brain right now. And this might happen to you. This was happening a bit to Melissa when she was dealing with these big, important people. She would kind of feel like she'd lost it right in the middle of something. And either it meant that she couldn't concentrate or she couldn't focus on what was being said, or she just didn't do anything. She literally froze. She didn't offer an opinion. She didn't come back with a challenge, didn't do anything. She just froze. And the next one, which you might not have heard of, is fawn. And that fawn response is like, oh, yeah, you're probably right. Right? Agreeing maybe with something somebody's saying, even if you really don't agree with it. Sucking up to someone. You might notice people doing that fawn response, and it is like a safety response. It's designed to kind of try and keep you out of danger. So that's kind of some of the sort of responses that you might notice when dealing with big, important people. The other things that you might notice, because it comes from that same physiological stress reaction, is you might notice that you get hot or cold. You might notice that you get slightly sweaty. You might notice that your heart rate increases. You might feel a little bit of tightening in your chest. You might find your mouth goes dry. All of those are physiological signs that your stress response has been activated. And because mostly you're sat in a chair, you don't really need to run anywhere. You don't really need to punch anyone. So you've got all this adrenaline and cortisol flying around, and it's just making you sweat, making you hot, making you go red, whatever, giving you a dry mouth. So if you notice any of these around big, important people, you may be like Melissa. And if you have this issue or you're going to explore this issue, I think you need to know, it's good to notice that you're having a stress response, because it's good to know that you're just having a normal physiological response that the body has when it thinks you're in danger. Good to know. Good to know that the system's working, because one day you're actually really going to need it. But I think you also need to explore what it is you're thinking about the big, important person or big, important people. What are your thoughts about them when you're interacting with them? Because that's creating this stress response. Or it might be that you've had so many situations like that in the past, you're not even aware of any conscious thought at all, and it's just triggering this, even like getting an email that lands in the inbox from that person, from that big important person, might trigger that stress response straight away, like in an instant before you could even think a thought. So me and Melissa explored what were her thoughts about the big important people. And when I'm coaching someone, what we're doing a lot of the time is we're surfacing thoughts which are operating often below the surface, sometimes quite a long way below the surface. We're not always conscious of them, but when we kind of dig around a little bit, they fall out. They just come out of your mouth and you're like, oh, I did not know I was thinking that. So if I was coaching you, I'd be asking you questions and I'd be like seeing like what came out. And some of the stuff that will come out is the thoughts that you're thinking when you're in these situations with these big, important people. And sometimes they might surprise you. But the first thing is to be able to see them, to actually know what they are, because they're creating your feelings. And then you're taking action based on that. And then you're getting a result. And in this case, it was a result that Melissa didn't like. She didn't like what was happening. But in order to get a new result, we had to know what was driving her current result. We had to become aware of what was actually happening, what was creating the fear. And some of it was the thoughts that were lurking in the background when she was interacting with the big important people. And we identified 7. And the first one was they're big important people. And then when we pushed a little bit, the unsaid bit was, and I'm not. So imagine that. You're going into a meeting with these people, and your thought is, they're big, important people, and I'm not. You can see how that would create a little bit of fear, maybe, bit of tension, bit of stress. The next thought that she had was, they know everything. And the unsaid bit was, and I don't. So imagine that. She had to be deferential to them and not really challenge them because they were the ones that knew everything and she didn't. The next thought was, I have to get this perfect. And the unsaid bit was, and I can't. She knew what she was reporting to them on wasn't perfect. There were many factors that were out with her control that meant the situation was kind of far from perfect. But she was thinking, I have to report this perfect situation. I have to get this perfect. I have to deliver this perfectly. And I can't. It's impossible. Now imagine the stress response that creates. Yeah, you've got to get this perfect, but good luck with it because you can't. Terrible. The next one was, I cannot. And that was in capitals. I cannot mess this up. And the unsaid bit with that was, and if I do, my job is on the line and my entire reputation. Oh, no pressure, Melissa. But if you mess this up, your job is on the line and your entire reputation. Oh my God, imagine the stress. The next thought we identified was, I have to prove myself. Even though she'd already got the job. She felt like she had to continually prove herself every single time. And any slip up was, in fact, proof that they never should have given her the job in the first place. No stress at all. But just imagine thinking, I have to prove myself, and any slip up means that they're going to think they should never have given me the job, and I'm going to think they should never have given me the job. You wouldn't really want to slip up, would you? The next thought we identified was, I need to be articulate. And the unsaid bit was, you don't sound clever. I was like, Melissa, that is so harsh. She was a smart woman. She is a smart woman. But that's what was going on in her brain. You need to be articulate and you don't sound clever. And actually, a further bit was, and they do. So no pressure. Just be articulate. But by the way, you don't sound clever. And they do. So imagine that. Imagine for a moment, if you will, that right before you have to go and report to some big important people, you can hear everybody saying, they're big important people and you're not. They know everything and you don't. You've got to get this perfect, but you can't. You cannot mess this up. And if you do, your job is on the line and your entire reputation is on the line. You have to prove yourself. And if you make any mistake, they'll think they should never have given you the job, and you'll know you should never have got the job either. You need to be articulate. and you don't sound clever. They're big, important people, and you're not. Imagine hearing that before, during, and after your interactions with the big, important people. How would you feel confident? How would you feel confident if that is what you were hearing? You wouldn't. You'd be like a nervous wreck. And Melissa was like a nervous wreck. And she was like, I don't get it. And it's like, well, let's just take a look at what's going on in your brain. You're being accused of being unclever, inarticulate, messing things up, and your job's on the line and your reputation's on the line. Like, the no pressure. What an amazing amount of pressure she was putting herself under, unknowingly, with all those thoughts that were in her mind. So then our job is, okay, we know what's happening now. We know that all of that stuff in your brain is creating an amazing amount of pressure. And when you feel under such pressure, guess what? You're not articulate. You can't be. It's virtually impossible. You stumble over your words. You don't make contributions that you know you could make. You don't challenge anyone when you know they're wrong. You do not show up as the expert that you are. These are all the things that Melissa was doing around these big, important people. Overchecking things to the nth degree. So once we've surfaced these thoughts and we can really see what they are and what the problem is, right? The problem is the pressure which is being created by these thoughts. The pressure is creating the result that she doesn't want. So once we've surfaced these thoughts, we pull them out and we have a look at them. We examine them and see if they stand up to scrutiny and, are they true? Are they fair? What happens when they're operating in the background? Well, we know what happens when they're operating in the background. She was over preparing. She was thinking of every eventuality that she might get asked beforehand. She wasn't sleeping well the night before. During, she was trying to focus on being articulate, which led to a stumbling on her words. She was really trying to focus on how she was being perceived, which led to her being unable to focus on the flow of the conversation. She was thinking, I cannot mess this up, which was leading her to rehearse everything in her head. So she couldn't concentrate and she lost the thread of what was going on. She did say there was even a couple of occasions where she didn't know what they'd just asked her and she had to ask them to repeat it. Because she was so in her head, trying to make sure that they were perceiving her in the right way and she was going to be saying everything in the right way. And then after, so that's before and during the interaction with the big important people, after, she would hyper focus on any little thing that went wrong and beat herself up for it. She completely ignored anything that went right, which is what our brains do. But she would dissect and pull apart her performance, all of which created more pressure for next time. And I'm going to use Melissa's own words here. All in all, she said, it was a shit show. Always made me laugh. But it got better. And it didn't even take that long to get markedly better. She solved this issue in under 3 months working with me. And I'd say we probably coached on it for about 2 hours max. And she was able to turn it around. I asked her for a progress report before this podcast. I was like, I sent her an email, said, I'm going to make a podcast about big, important people. Can I share your story? And she was like, yeah, sure. And I said, have you got any update for me on how things are going and what happened and, your take on it? And she said, yeah. And she sent me quite a detailed email. And I said, have I got your permission to read this out on the podcast? Because I think it's powerful that actually people hear it in your words and hear it coming from you. And she sent me this email entitled Shit Show to Showcase. And it says, I had always been that way with big, important people. And I'd got to the point of accepting that it would always be that way. I didn't know how to change it, and I didn't really know why it was happening. All I knew was that it was getting on my nerves, and I would be so mad with myself for fluffing up yet again, which I know you would tell me, so she's referring to me, was one of the reasons why things were the way they were. Once I could actually see the thoughts I had and could see how much pressure they were creating and that they mostly weren't true, things got a bit easier. The thoughts were more worries than anything, and they didn't have much basis in fact. Once I really grasped that, lots of it just seemed to melt away. It feels a bit like magic, to be honest. Sometimes I still get nervous, but I know how to deal with it now. I am much braver in those conversations with the big important people, and I don't stress if I don't know something. I feel okay to say I will go away and find out, and they are okay with that too. I can be myself, which also seems to work instead of trying to figure out how to do this fake perfect thing, which to be honest never really worked anyway. And I then asked specifically what she would tell other women. So, what she would tell the podcast listeners who find themselves in the same situation as her. So, if I have podcast listeners who find they struggle in their interactions with the big important people, what would she want to tell them? And here's what she said. And I'm going to read it again because her words are perfect. She said, basically, don't accept it. I'm glad that I kept trying to solve it until I found something that actually worked. I honestly thought so many times in the past about going to therapy to help me with it because I didn't know what else I could do. I tried Googling it and I went on a presentation skills course, but nothing really seemed to help. I had no idea that a coach could help me with it, but lucky me, I found someone who could. Now I don't worry so much about big important people and I can enjoy my job more. And I know it's going to make my next interview for promotion easier because there will be 4 normal people looking at me from across the table, not 4 big important people. And they haven't changed. I have. Isn't that beautiful? So if you struggle with big important people in your job, Confident at Work might be the place for you. That is where Melissa did this work. It's a small group coaching program and, well, coaching and training. It's a paid program where we take the learning that you do in the podcast and we turn that into your new reality. We make it stick. So we get you using new habits and new ways of working and get those cemented into your brain like we did with Melissa. So you don't have to have those annoying problems within your work anymore. And to be honest, you've got enough things to worry about without confidence being one of them. It is possible for you to show up as the expert and be the one who's confident with the big important people, as well as with your teams and your peers. The reality is, it's probably always going to be slightly more difficult with those people. But it doesn't have to be paralyzing. It doesn't have to be so hard. You don't have to be not sleeping properly the night before. You don't have to be having nervous poos on the morning of. You don't have to be over preparing to death or checking an email for 45 minutes that you're about to send to them. The doors to Confident at Work are opening on the 30th of Jan for the next round. And if you're not already on my email list, get on the email list and you will be sent all of the details. All right, that's what I've got for you today. Good luck in dealing with your big, important people, whoever they are for you. And I will see you in next week's episode. Bye.